Hey there, it's Louisa from Feel Good Astrology, and let's have a look at another lesson from Venus. So this is day 4 of my 40-day challenge, where I'm recording something to help you in terms of understanding your love coding and also how to find greater intimacy and joy within your relationships. So this is a little bit about how you can understand your own coding in your chart from the perspective of Venus. Now, over the next, I don't know how many sessions I'm going to do on this, but over the next few recordings, for sure, I'm going to be looking at the position of Venus within your chart and how that might influence the quality of connection and the quality of flow that you experience in your life. So today we're going to be actually looking at the hard aspects. So let's bring up some of that info now. So my big question is, do you have hard aspects to Venus in your birth chart? So I've got a few different charts here that certainly have some hard aspects to them. And I just want to talk through how this might manifest in terms of relationship energy. So in this chart, we look straight away to find Venus, and Venus is right here, very, very close to the ascendant. At 22 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, at first glance, you might think, oh, Venus and Mars are together. That's exciting. This is somebody who's got their masculine and feminine in a really nice, interesting balance. And they've got a certain amount of libertarianism. It's in the sign of Sagittarius. They're probably quite enthusiastic, quite adventurous in the way that they love. And I will be talking about Venus by sign, i.e. this one's in Sagittarius, mine's in the sign of Capricorn, and all of our Venuses will be in a particular place in our charts. But as you look more closely, you can see that Venus is actually in a series of squares. So the first squares I'm drawing your attention to, and this is actually quite tight. So this person has got their Venus in a square with these short red lines are always known as squares. And it's bringing it down to Ceres here, the symbol that looks like a question mark with a line through it. And then it's also in a square to Chiron. Now, Chiron is this guy here that looks like a key that's being turned on its side. Now, I should say both Chiron and Ceres are in a tight conjunction as well. So Chiron is the wounded healer. That's what he's known for, is, creating lots of trauma and aspects in our life that show where we struggle to resolve things. And Ceres often shows us our mum and our ability to nurture, to be nurtured. And so right off the bat, as I'm looking at this, I think, woo, this person could very well have some real trauma issues to do with the mum. Maybe they didn't get enough nurturing. Maybe they had a very overbearing mum. But there is definitely something going on there with the idea of the divine feminine and the inheritance that has come through the family lineage that's creating a certain amount of trauma. And that's in a square to Venus. Now, the square energy is showing that there is a lack of flow. Like if Chiron was here, let's say, and in a trine with Venus, what I would think is, well, that's quite helpful. Through love, this person is able to experience healing. Like the more they're in love with somebody or the more they love themselves, they're absolutely healing their life and whatnot. Whereas for this person, when they are experiencing love, and when they're being loved and shown love, and when they're loving themselves, at the same time, there is quite possibly the pain and the hurt of not being fully loved before. So it's almost like this hidden potential in the charts, and obviously at any point in your life, you can release yourself from this tendency, but essentially there is a breaking of the flow from the feeling of love creating a sense of healing. And in fact, what comes up is usually a sense of difficulty. So the more you get loved, the more you almost want to hide the love because it might heal you, and the pain of being healed from those things is just too much. It's a pain that's a little bit difficult to handle. And so then we have a look a little further and you're like, oh, there's a few more squares here. So you can also see there's this square to Pluto and also a square to Uranus. Now, Pluto is known for control and death and recycling and resurrection. Pluto is not an easy planet to work with in a chart. And so at some level, there is a feeling of possible death or dying or an end of a cycle. There is a finality associated with Pluto. And also there is Uranus, which is, I need to run away and break free and be independent and just to separate ourselves from that which is traumatizing. And so this is quite a big aspect. And having these two together so tied is really, really strong. And a lot of people for whom I've seen this, and a lot of people born between 64 and 67 will have some iteration of Pluto and Uranus together. But it just so happens that, this person's got their Venus and their Mars in a square to Pluto and Uranus. So what's going on here? Well, when this person feels controlled, they also want to run away. They might even use the threat of running away as a way to maintain control. So there's this very uneasy stance, and there's this very uneasy trauma response to past trauma. So it might be that, there's an overbearing mum or an overbearing parent, and that the easy thing for them to do is to kind of run away and be distant from the parent, which is a form of protection. And then they use the distance to create a sense of safety. They withdraw from that which causes them trauma. But of course, if you're coming into this person's life and expressing a loving relationship with them, as they're experiencing love, it is automatically reminding them of everything that is not love. And here it is, and there it is. And in fact, these are also working against each other. So this is quite difficult to work through. And, bless this person that's going through this. It's quite a tough set of circumstances. Made worse as well, because this person's also got Mars in all these squares as well. So it's not just the feeling of love, but it's also the feeling of sexual intimacy as well that creates such a strong set of feelings. But let's explore it a little bit more. Sorry. So yeah, we've said, Venus is also conjunct Mars, and this can make him very, very passionate, or her passionate. So this chart, whoever's chart this is, not only are they likely to express their love in a whole myriad of ways that don't necessarily make sense in terms of usual relationships, but the sexual side of it as well is likely to be corrupted through these patterns and insecurities about themselves. So it's a huge thing to deal with. So anyway, as you can see, this is a pretty tough situation to find yourself in. And Jupiter looks like he's in opposition to Venus and Mars. Really, I mean, that's a little bit pushing it. It's slightly out of opposition from my perspective. But Jupiter is showing up in opposition to the ascendant and also the moon, which is definitely sort of playing into this whole situation. I mean, one thing I can see is that this person's sun in the sign of Scorpio is quite helpful. It connects with this area of pain down here, and is also connecting to Jupiter. So here's one aspect that could be a relief point for this person. But this is a pretty tough Venus position, I have to say. It's also in the 12th house, and I'll be talking about that in the house episode that I'm going to record. Let's have a look at some other charts now. So we've got another chart here, and here you can see Venus, again, funnily enough, in the 12th house. Again, I will be talking about Venus in the 12th house in a forthcoming episode. But Venus here is in a square to Pluto, to Mars, to the North Node, and also to Uranus. Now, this is a lot of squares this person's got to deal with. So they're programming for love and connection and flow. I don't want to just say that Venus is about love, because she is definitely about the flow of loving energy, or the flow of beneficial energy, the flow of connection. And so at some level, there is this disconnection point, or this pain, or something that comes up for this person that disconnects us. So at the time that this person was born, they've got Uranus in the North Node. So if you remember, Uranus is a planet that creates separation and like stops the flow of things. It's very sudden. It's very spontaneous. Can be very fun. But it's the element of surprise, so Uranus shows us where we want to be independent, shows us where we want to do things our own way. And that's also connected into the North Node. So it feels almost like karmically this person needs to live quite differently. And then it's in a conjunction to Mars. So their self-expression and the way they get vitality is also through a sense of independence and a feeling of being able to make the call on their own life. And then, Mars and Pluto together is very, very strong. They're the two rulers of Scorpio, so we've got vitality and we've also got control. And so you've got control, vitality, a sense of karmic direction and independence, all tightly, impacted in the same part of the chart, in the third house. So this person is always talking about control and freedom, and how to make their own decisions, how to be sovereign, how to live fully and to express themselves fully. And at some level, it feels like Venus and the flow of love might create a stress for them. So possibly, when you're sharing a connection, it creates a tension from the desire to live life in your own way. It's creating some polarity that is very uncomfortable. And it could also be the thing that breaks, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Now, Venus is also square Chiron. So if we have a look up here, so we've got this feeling, this element here. Now, these are very, very wide orbs, I have to say. I would normally use an orb of 8 degrees, not 10. So this is a bit bigger than I like as a difference. So maybe it's not quite square Chiron. I think it's slightly out of square. But let's consider that Chiron is square Venus here. Venus and Chiron in a square, like Chiron is the pain and trauma of being yourself. It's the Achilles heel that we haven't yet come to repair. It's that thing that happens that we can't quite articulate. We can see other people's hurts and wounds, and it's like the unhealable wound. And of course, everything is healable at some level, but it's that thing that we struggle about. And so here we've got Chiron in a square to Venus. And that could very well bring up issues of when they're in love. When this person is in love, it brings an awareness to the unhealable wound. Maybe that unhealable wound for them is about intimacy and what intimacy might mean in terms of their independence. And their pain is very much associated with not being independent, and yet being independent also paradoxically causes them some trauma and pain. It's quite possible that this independence was developed as a result and a response to the trauma of isolation, or being scapegoated or something like that. This person has chosen independence and a free spirit as a way to free themselves. So this is a huge thing. And of course, we've got this opposition here as well. Let's see if there's anything else. One thing I would say about this Venus, although it's got these hard squares, which are very difficult to deal with, this Venus has also got some lovely trines. So it's got this lovely trine energy to Saturn and also to Jupiter. And it's also got a sextile to Pallas Athena and also to Juno, which is very, very supportive. So I love that. So, you know, if I was looking at this chart and the previous chart and thinking, who would I want to be in a relationship with? This one would be the one that I would have a preference for sure, because it's got some lovely softness to the Venus, you know. They do let love in. However, love does bring up quite a few challenges. So this next one, this is actually my own chart. I thought I'd come clean and show you my hard aspects to Venus. Now I've got two. So the first one is I've got that square to Pluto. That feeling actually, that control somehow disconnects me from the flow of feeling. And the way it manifests in my own life is I've tended to run a mile from anyone that seeks to control me. So if I think someone is trying to control me, manipulate me, gaslight me, try to shame me, I'm out of here. You know, I'm like, see you later. And we will be talking about houses that our Venuses fall in. Mine's in my 3rd, and this square is in my 11th. So if I feel control from outside networks, outside groups, outside, you know, basically it's almost like wanting to be an outsider so that you don't get controlled. And that's connected to my Venus. And so that obviously stops the flow of love coming my way from time to time if I let it get too much of an aspect in my chart. Now, my Venus is also, as you'll see, in opposition to Saturn. Now, this isn't a very easy one to deal with. Saturn shows where we might feel lonely, where we might feel isolated, and where we might feel like Saturn represents grown-ups and authority, and it also shows our parents, mainly the dad, and it also can show a remote male, you know. So Saturn here is interesting. It's in opposition to my Venus. It's almost like, well, in some charts, you may well find it relates to somebody who loves very unassuming men, or men that don't actually give very much. You know, because there's almost this feeling of, am I worthy of it? Am I worthy of that attention? Because the flow of love is in a disconnected state to older people, people in authority, and possibly an authoritative man, possibly an older man. And it can show that we connect with people that reject us. Saturn can sometimes show where we are rejected or where we feel rejection from. So there's a bit of a theme going on here. I am going to put myself in the easy aspect category as well, because I've got a lot of really nice little aspects to Venus as well. And also I will look at Venus in the sign of Capricorn and the 3rd house in due course too, because whilst I've got these hard aspects which create what's known as a T-square, can you see there's a essentially it's a right angle triangle. T-squares are difficult to resolve. They're not very easy. But if you've got a nice trine or a sextile working with that energy, then there's a little bit of, there's an area where the difficulty can discharge to. And so you can look at your chart to see where the discharge points are. Let's just have a look at another one and see where that takes us. So in this example, we've got Venus here in the 6th house. And she has got a square to the midheaven. Now, the midheaven is a place where we are our own authority, but it also shows us other people's authority and how it impacts us. It also shows our career, our destiny, our legacy. It also shows what we're hoping to achieve in the world. And so at some level here, Venus is a huge distraction to this person's mission in life. And so it feels like the flow of love, the flow of companionship, the love of ease and grace is somehow a little bit jarring with the midheaven. And so it causes a little bit of friction for this person. So they're not so much reacting necessarily to another person, but the idea that, look, this is my career and love is separate from it, or love is a distraction. So this person, in many respects, is trying to keep the two separate. Now, the midheaven can also show us a parent, most notably the parent that is most external, and the most successful parent. But it's interesting here because he's also got Venus in a square to Ceres. And so my big question is, like Ceres often shows a mum or a very strong motherly type, or somebody who is managing every aspect of things. Ceres is essentially Mother Nature. And so she's able to cope with loads and loads of different things. So there is this, maybe it's the inner direction of the person whose chart this is, that they want to be all things to all men. They want to be able to manage every part of a project. This is the 10th house. This is all about the career. And so this is a huge distraction to love and the fulfillment of love. And that's something that person would need to get over at some point. Venus here is also in a conjunction with the vertex, and the vertex is a useful point. It's an astronomical, mathematically counted and calculated point. And I always think of the vertex as being the voice of the universe, telling you what you need to do. So at some level, this person is feeling like they're supposed to be up here doing lots of great things in their career. And yet the universe is saying, actually, we want you to focus on love. This is what you're meant to be doing. So again, that's quite a dynamic to live through, right? So that was me having a look at some difficult aspects in a chart in terms of Venus and how Venus is expressed. None of these charts necessarily mean they would be bad partners. So if you've got any of these aspects yourself, don't consider yourself, oh, I must be a terrible partner, or I'll never have love. Like I've shown you my own chart, and I've got a T-square with my Venus, which definitely plays out in my life. And yet I've been married for, I've been married for 10 years. I'm in a relationship for 13. I had a long relationship of 11 years before. So I've got a pretty good track record, I would say. Nothing is impossible. So yeah, notice what you've got going on there, and then start to tease out the meaning of the planets and understand that the oppositions feel very much like there's a core challenge. And with the squares, it feels like you can't do both at the same time. Well, it's a bit like that with both, actually, but the squares are slightly easier to resolve, and the oppositions are definitely more challenging. I think there's a lot more projection with oppositions. It's like a reflection for you. So anyway, in the next episode, I'm going to be looking at the easy aspects. So please join me for the 5th episode of these lessons from Venus. Anyway, take care. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.